Hi, if you've been following along in our walk through the Psalms, we're coming to Psalm 66, and from Psalm 61 up through Psalm 66, we have Psalms in which a representative of Israel speaks out to Israel and sometimes to the world. And I think this representative is the Messiah himself. Now, we come to Psalm 66, in which this representative of Israel calls out to the world and really displays the power of God, which is seen and recognized in the millennium, in the days to come, when the Messiah, the representative, will say to the nations, "Shout joyfully to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of his name. May his praise be glorious. Say to your God, how awesome are your works because of the greatness of your power. Your enemies who give feigned obedience to you. All the earth will worship you." Indeed, in that day, all the earth will worship him. In fact, some will do so with feigned obedience, the power of the Messiah given so strongly that no one will dare not bow down. You remember at the end of the age, at the end of the millennium, there's that battle of Gog and Magog in which Satan is released for a short time, and we'll find out whether or not it's real obedience or feigned obedience. And so in verses 1 through 7, this representative comes and calls the earth to recognize that God is reigning over the earth through the Messiah. Then in verses 8 down through verse 12, there is the testimony of Israel given as we go from speaking in the third person to speaking in the second person voice. And Israel gives her testimony, and it comes through the mouth of this representative and says, "Bless our God, O peoples, and sound his praise abroad, who keeps us in life and does not allow our foot to slip." This is a word, a testimony from Israel. "For you have tried us, O God, and you have refined us as silver is refined." This is what God is doing in Israel. "You brought us into the net. You have laid an oppressive burden upon our loins. You've made men ride over our heads. We went through the fire and through the water. Yet you brought us out into a place of abundance." Eventually, Israel will be able to sing this song, sung prophetically here by the representative of Israel. As they speak, Israel will someday speak about having come through the fire and through the water. I believe prophetically speaking of the tribulation, and yet come out to a place of abundance, that is, to the promised land, or really to the time of the millennium. Then verses 13, 14, and 15, it changes from second person to first person. So we've had third person, second person, now first person. In verse 13, "I shall come into your house with burnt offerings. I shall pay you for my vows." It's a word to God. It's a word spoken by the representative of Israel, as Israel comes and says, "We're going to fulfill the vows that we made." Remember when the vows were made to Joshua, the people of Israel said, "We'll stand with you. We'll serve the Lord." And Joshua says, "I don't think you're going to be able to. God is not going to receive you." And they say, "No, we insist, we will." Now, finally, they come and they pay their vows. And then Israel and this representative and this king, the Messiah, give their testimony in verses 16 through 20. "Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell you what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I regard wickedness on my heart, the Lord will not hear, but certainly God has heard. He's given heed to the voice of my prayer." Now, just imagine, if I'm right here, that this is the Messiah speaking as the representative of Israel. And here he comes and says, he's heard the voice of my prayer. That is the prayer that Jesus answered, that Jesus prayed in the garden even. "Not my will, but thine be done." The will of the Father was done, and now the will of the Messiah, of Christ himself, is being done, and he is receiving his nation who rejected him. He came into his own, and his own received him not, has now received him. Closes out, "Blessed be God, who has not turned away my prayer, nor his loving kindness from me." May the day come quickly when that prayer is prayed by Israel and answered by God. I'm Dr. Randy White.